Okay, welcome to the first panel of the exhibition. And we decided to speak English. I hope this is okay with all of you. And I first want to start with some an introduction, short introduction text. The exhibition Underground and Improvisation combines two exhibitions, which were planned in different times and presented in different locations. Notes from the Underground was presented in autumn 2016 in Łódź, Poland, and at the Museum Sztuki in Łódź, and FMP, the Living Music, was presented from spring in 2017 at Haus der Kunst in München. Both exhibitions were offered to the Akademie der Künste already while they were in planning, where they were planned. And the decision to combine the two exhibitions came in summer 2016, before they were presented. Because from the conviction, that the reflection on the experimental, anarchic or avant-gardistic development in music in West Berlin and Eastern Europe could complement one another. And since this decision was taken to combine the two exhibitions here at the Akademie der Künste, an intensive process started to create a discursive program, which we are opening tonight. A program to accompany the exhibitions. That is what we will have in the next 2 months. We will have all these events. According to the two different focuses of the exhibition, we also have two moderators, one for notes and one for FMP. Notes is Manos Tsangaris, and FMP is Manos for the music, and I'm for notes. Now I want to shortly introduce you to the panelists here. And I start with David Crowley. He is a Dublin-based curator and writer with an interest in Eastern Europe under communist rule. Daniel Muzyczuk is head of the modern art department at the Museum Sztuki in Łódź. And both of them created notes of the Underground, the exhibition for the Museum Sztuki in 2016 and re-adapted it with Angela Lammert for the Akademie der Künste in collaboration with Angela Lammert in 2018. Then, next to me is Markus Müller, not Manfred as one of the said. Is the author and curator of the exhibition Free Music Production FMP, the Living Music. In 2007, he founded the Birgit Müller, a communication and consulting company in Berlin. Who is Lou?
Louis.
Who is Louis?
I
don't know.
Okay.
Because we have another representative.
Yeah.
Louis Rastig.
You lost him.
He was downstairs.
He was there. I mean, he was really down there. Because da kommt This is Louis Rastig. He is a Berlin-based musician and curator, and he curated the music program. It is important for the music program and for Underground and Improvisation. And yeah, Manos, introduce yourself.
Me? I'm a musician.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, me, I'm a filmmaker. And artist. Okay, so should we start with one question? What do you think? Yeah? So I asked the four curators, Did the combination of the two exhibitions was habe ich denn jetzt hier geschrieben? How does the combination of the two exhibitions produce new relations? Because both exhibitions, as I told you, were differently planned and also at different times, and they came here for the first time together. So, who wants to answer? Did it change your original concept, or how does it create new relations?
Yeah, I think these are two different questions, and I'll start with the one whether the knowledge that FMP will be teamed up, will be label mates with Notes from the Underground, was something that hardly did influence my conceptualization of the exhibition. First of all, as you rightfully mentioned, both exhibitions already existed, and the teaming up is after the first realization. What did happen though, and I think that's like that's the bread and butter of curating, you have to do what I would call structural adjustments. Yeah? Obviously, this space is distinctly different from Munich. Yeah? One can be extremely ordinary and say that we have maybe 1/3 of the objects that we had in Munich. But I have to say I like it better here, which has to do with another rather simple but I believe very important fact, and I hope it's immediately understandable. Yeah. We are sitting on a stage in front of an audience that's sitting in this room in the Akademie in 1974. So this room is the room where the workshop Freie Musik took place from 1969 till 1998, and that of course changed the way that I thought about constructing the exhibition. The other question, whether there are new alliances and new how to put it, whether there are new insights being produced by the teaming. I honestly have to say that I could now, come up with a whole bunch of superlatives. For me, installing together with Daniel, being able to sneak into Halle 1 every now and then was more than just a pleasure. I think the combination is a way of producing new knowledge. There are a lot of things that can interrelate between these two exhibitions, and they are way more than I would have ever imagined. So yeah, I think it's a very lucky combination, and I think it's actually specifically because the exhibitions in their core, that's my understanding, come here preconceived. There is a methodology and an idea that was there, and now they're together, and I think it's better that way. I think it's
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because having these two exhibitions side by side turns your exhibition into a lens on ours, and vice versa. So as I walk around this afternoon, I was thinking about a decision that we made, which is, I think it's a slightly provocative decision. We used the word primitive because we knew that artists and designers and musicians in Eastern Europe in the 1980s decided to often somehow assume a kind of primitive identity, think in relation to power. So they sort of did an act of self-abjection and made themselves new primitives. And that makes a lot of sense in an Eastern European context. But then I walk around here and I can see right in front of me these paint images. And then I started to think, well, but would I want to use the word primitive in that context, right? That's kind of a really problematic word. And I haven't thought about that in our context, because it does a job when we think about Eastern Europe. I don't know if I'd want to use that word quite in the same way again. So that lens is kind of interesting to me.
Absolutely, I totally agree. The fun thing, though, is that not Pank, yeah, but the generation that came to the fore while Pank became a superstar. Yeah? So the painters, Albert Oehlen, Kippenberger, but also Rainer Fetting, and so on and so on. Now, how were they called? Die Neuen Wilden.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So there come the primitives, right again. Yeah? And I believe one of the reasons why that clicks also has to do with the fact that in '77, Boltzmann, he created a poster, and you see a man that's like struck by a light. Now the important part for me is, it's like mega contemporary. This is punk. You know, this could have been a Sex Pistol poster, period. Yeah? And the fact that he was so right on, like literally surfing on that wave, and for me it's like, it goes right into your exhibition. That kind of history. And then you have a fascination from the punk side with that kind of music, for the obvious energy level that's produced there, but also for the successful do-it-yourself attitude. Yeah.
Bits like that, the Hungarians, they call themselves punk jazz.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Also in this context, I think, because my impression now is that it's how you kind of take it from the historical part, and all those expressions like punk or the primitives. Primitive was the first one. He's the first one, or she. No, it was saying this. He is the first one of his art of his kind. But it all sounds for me a bit, the energy is always a kind of opposite, being opposite, kind of resisting against. And my question is, what is, I mean, maybe it's not even a question, but what is, did opposition mean and resistance in Łódź, for example, or the East in general? What did it mean in the West? And what does it mean today? It's his job.
Well, we were trying our best not to deliver just one notion of what the underground is, counterculture, or what it was. Actually, we were really cautious not to be caught in this opposition simple opposition between state and the underground, which you can easily get into while studying the histories of imprisonment, or simply, to put it simply, repression of youth cultures. I think we've managed to unfold us different stories that were stories of how the young artists or intermedia cultures were abusing all the possibilities offered by those socialist states. Sometimes possibilities to organize concerts. Sometimes, a printer had some spare paper that could be used to do a zine or whatever, or to use the possibility of the state-owned company to release real-time records. So, in fact, we've came up with a few stories that were speaking of also different ways of identifying oneself or putting oneself into this opposition between state or mainstream actually and the underground. The obvious story, of course, is Czechoslovak psychedelic circle around the Primitives group and Plastic People of the Universe, where we literally are speaking about the suppression, imprisonment, and the harsh moments of the underground. But most of those stories are not stories of the obvious, are rather stories of maybe intimidation, maybe slight surveillance, but never of the harshest levels. I mean, the question of what's underground today is not the question that this exhibition addresses. When the obvious force that makes censorship is gone, you're suddenly allowed to do whatever on the internet, and that whatever doesn't necessarily mean that you're.
Sorry for interrupting. I didn't ask for the underground.
All right.
I asked for opposition.
Yes, sure.
It's maybe only slightly different, but it's a different.
Well, of course, yeah. You're asking about counterculture. Counterculture.
Yeah.
Counterculture.
Counterculture, or counter-thinking maybe. Because I think both the FMP and what I can perceive nowadays from the what we call underground, or what is just the topic of the whole show, is kind of defined by opposition. In the moment, my impression was in the moment, for example, in the German Republic, in the moment when you didn't have the system as a kind of Widerstand, something, the whole thing, then lots of activities imploded. And the same thing, and this is why I'm asking, because my impression is there are very different basics and conditions of things which look and sound partly in the surface, sound very, very similar. But in the way, the energy which is in there and the concrete context in which things are happening are very different. It's really a question, and I'm interested in what did it mean, this kind of energy working against the system there. And my impression in the West, when I was around 12 to 14 years old when this happened here, with the free music and mirth and those things, my impression was that the whole society was so different, because the young people in Germany, which I knew, they noticed that their parents had been Nazis. And they noticed that the teachers who were now teaching them in basic school, they had been the Nazis. And they still had the same methods also of teaching. Not all of them, but the whole system was there. And so this kind of system to work against also had to be invented in that moment, had to be made up. Okay, what is this? Where are we in exactly? Okay, no, I don't want this. Some people went into pop music, most of them then went into pop music, but some specialists went into free improvisation, fluxus, etc. And so this is interesting. Sorry for interrupting.
Just one important idea. I think we have to be very clear that a lot of the parents of the people living in the GDR in 1968 were also Nazis. And even some in the other countries in the Eastern Bloc. And then I think the preposition of talking about FMP as opposition, I would say it's the wrong preposition. First of all, realities, societal realities in the Eastern Bloc were distinctly different. And that's not even a homogeneous bloc. We know that Poland and Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, for a lot of very practical historical reasons were quite different. Now, what I would always say is that FMP was, first of all, about empowerment. You take things into your own hands and you create a reality. I mean, Weizmann, yes, they were also opposing certain regimes and routines. How is music presented? How much jobs do you get, and so on and so on. But first and foremost, it's a quite simple reality. He was supposed to sign a contract where his bandmates wear black suits. He couldn't guarantee that. He was thrown out of the jazz town. Yeah? So what to do? Weizmann was supposed to play 68 at the Berliner Jazztage. To be able to play there, you had to sign a contract, guarantee that your band will appear on stage in suits, in black suits. He didn't sign that. He couldn't. And he was immediately disinvited. Couldn't play. That's why.
Yeah, but that's a system he was opposing against also.
Yeah, no, well, he was. They were working under that system, and of course there's an internal opposition, but they created their own reality. They said, okay, fuck that. We will do our
this is
own
what
festival.
the people in the East also, they also created their own reality. I'm sorry, you should say that.
But would they have been invited to some major meeting in the first place?
Who?
Artists in Eastern Europe? Unofficial artists to official events?
That happened a lot. I mean, the exhibition is not an exhibition about being necessarily in straightforward opposition against the state or the mainstream. To be frank, for me, it's an oversimplification of a more subtle, or a set of more subtle problems. It's an exhibition probably more about self-invention, self-design, improvisation or improvised means of production and distribution of information. And they like
it's
I
like
said,
empowerment. This is what
Yes.
also what.
and like I said, it uses the power when it can use the power. Sometimes it sneaks behind the back of the power. It's just always there where there's a hole in the system that can be filled with creative energy. There are just several stories of straightforward opposition against. And what happens in the 90s is that a lot of this energy dissolves. It's not so much about the lack of political oppression, because that would speak about the fact that I can't agree with that. The oppression in a society means that there's more creativity. It's more about the change of economic structure of the societies. It's about the fact that these young people that in the 80s could live for a few pennies, or have their social security really carefully needed by the socialist governments. Are suddenly forced to take jobs, and production of art pieces is not anymore really cheap, but starts to be really expensive. It's then it's not so much about the straightforward political opposition, but a recreation of a social and economic view.
He's talked about the people used, I'm trying to quote, a whole of society, a whole in society. And where are the holes in society? Where now? Because it seems like what you said, then it became people who had to take jobs, or for example, or the whole situation changed. I have the feeling, maybe I'm overemphasizing it, but I have the feeling that on one hand the whole thing is a hole, and on the other hand there are no holes anymore in the same moment.
I'm not a sociologist, so I can't answer this question.
Sorry, Louis.
Yes, I think the do-it-yourself approach of both exhibition artists is what connects both, most of all, also concerning its impact into the 21st century. Because I would like to try to answer both questions at once. That's maybe the strongest relation between both exhibition contexts, which are very different on the one hand, but both presenting DIY culture in its very first years in Europe. That's why I also like it very much that there's a kind of a Western part and a Western and an Eastern part, because of course the FNP movement mostly presented mid-European artists in exchange with, for example, American people or from Japan.
Geht noch ein bisschen näher an das Mikro, das zu leiten.
So, yes, and I think that's the most, the strongest impact for nowadays, to see what DIY culture can do over the centuries, as the former pioneers also grew up career-wise and get more and more popular. So also the problematic term of underground is actually way too superficial or too wide ranged to discuss about, because both exhibitions present different kinds of underground culture, which are but pretty similar by the core. That's why I think we should look for the not for differences too much, but more for the similarities of both exhibitions and their impact to newer generations of experimental music and performance arts, and especially, of course, improvisation as a main kind of activity during do-it-yourself actions and developments that are self-produced, because a self-produced state in the as a freelancer is a great part of both Western and also Eastern European groups and certain artists who kind of revolutionized this raw lifestyle.
Funny music in the background. Free, kind of free. No, well, I don't know if I got everything in all differentiation somehow, but I have the feeling now it's going into the direction of, okay, some people have the, again, they have the talent, and they are, they are nice creative people, and they will start, wherever they are, they will start improvising and doing funny artwork, the funny artwork. Sorry, but I think to put it on also on a very, let's say, individual level, nothing against the individual level, but no one who's just happy here like this will become an artist. I know this is a very romantic idea, but if everything is fine and you smoke your cigar and you sit there and everything is fine. At the sunset, you smoke the joint and it's fine. So no, there's always a lack and a gap and some kind of deficit situation. If it's individual or if it's in a society, and then there is this kind of contradiction that people start working. And of course, I'm also not a sociologist, but this is why I did not ask. I didn't want to point on this is the East and this is the West. No, that's not the point. But I'm interested in this because, after all, what you were describing is that today it's very, very difficult to be in opposition. Against what are you or you in opposition? On one hand, we see things are going wrong. Everyone can see in the moment that some things are going in society and globally are going wrong. We can discuss this or not. But where can we start acting?
fuck the Nazis, to start with that. Of course I'm in opposition all the time.
I mean, but
Fuck the Nazis.
But the question
What are we doing
addresses citizenship. It addresses, you know, there are different ways of being a citizen in today's societies. You can, you know, manifest on the streets. You can, you know, oppose through acting for political parties. For left wing would be the better example, probably. You know, like for a lot of artists that we were speaking about couldn't address political issues straightforward. They needed the art practice to conceal or to code political messages like Milan Knižák with his "I Love You" and Lenin songs. Today, I mean, for political activism, you don't need art necessarily.
This would be my next questions. Fuck the Nazis, okay, but for this I don't have to be an artist at first. Everyone
But
could be convinced like this.
yeah,
it's
but
always
I don't quite get it. So what's the negative? You think also in 1968 you didn't have to be an artist or create art to be in some kind of creative relationship.
But when I look at this, sorry.
I mean, 68 in the West, they put a lot more emphasis on the theory, and one point would be, there needs to be a cultural revolution before the social revolution, for example. So in theory, they dreamt about a kind of cultural revolution taking place to transform people and society to make, for example, another version of communism possible. So they had this idea of cultural revolution, and it would be interesting to look maybe in the East, because there something like more cultural practical actions took place without these without these strong theoretical approaches. Maybe it could be interesting to bring that in connection, not in the sense that the Western theoretical approach is the first, the lens, but maybe it works the other way around, like what kind of knowledge rises from these performances which took place in the East, now that we can see them from nowadays.
Did I get this, or I just tried
Sorry
to understand what you said at the beginning? You said something like that there could be a kind of cultural revolution before a political one, or what in society comes. This is really the very short version.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least that was an idea.
But this was the idea. This was the idea. When I see this photograph here, and it was 74,
Yes.
74. In that time, I remember the society. It was the feeling of people was we can change things. Maybe it was completely an illusion, but also the way people behave. We can change. We are on the way to change. We will change things, and yes, bicultural revolution.
The 70s already, so the actions in the 70s would build on a movement which had taken place earlier. You know, underground in Germany started in the middle of the 60s, and it was extremely important against censorship. When we started to present films that were forbidden films, and we would present them in public, and we had the most famous star was Otto Mühl. When we showed his films, there was a police action where 70 policemen would close the event in '68. That was not really a danger for us. What we wanted is to go against censorship. And this was not only the erotic, the sexual censorship, but also the political. When we started our film group, X-Screen, we would show for the first time the political documentaries we came from America, the anti-Vietnam films. We were the only to present them, because in the normal cinema, no documentary films would be shown. So, I mean, this wonderful situation in the middle of the 70s builds already up on a movement which started around, at least in West Germany, around 65, and under a strong influence from American culture. The art, the avant-garde art was American, and we had to find our way to continue in that sense. But it was a very, very strong influence. And as I said, the American anti-Vietnam films, we should show them. We were very close connected to the West. Very, very close to especially America, United States. That was the ideal. They were the most advanced. I just wanted to introduce this because the influence in the 60s, and even from the beginning of the 60s, not only in Germany, as well in England, in France, I mean, on Europe was the American culture, etc., which helped us to, which we called it underground, you know. But underground, that word came from America, and it only meant underground films which have no public, have no distribution. Very soon, underground then became the word for forbidden films, because they had also no distribution. But this is where it starts in the beginning of the 60s.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, because was it dangerous to show the films? Was it dangerous? Could you be put into prison and the system?
No.
Die Frage ist ein bisschen
schäbig. No, we couldn't. Also, when this big police action was against X-Screen, all the members, we got a Anklage, we were accused for showing forbidden Verbreitung unzüchtiger Schriften, distribution of obscene writings. But, for example, as we were in Cologne, which was a completely different situation, where even the head of the culture managed that the judges then decided to let us go. We did not even have a trial, you know. They would talk to each other and then they would say, okay, let's have it, you know. And but this was especially Cologne, very.
But I think one important task or also offer of the Booth exhibition is to communicate and to show a not so known chapter of, for example, East European crossover from music and visual art and design and living culture. And this is independent of the other question. I think very interesting that this is here the special crossover in between music and visual art, but that a lot of other exhibitions and other research works going on to this period or to this kind of art history in a way. And this, I think, is when I go up to your first question, Birgit, I think that is interesting to have this both exhibition here together and to look in the very differentiated manner of looking to the material, that we not come only to the cliché that is east or west or that is only underground against or such things, that you could really very differentiated in the special period, in the special country, in the special context, in the special situation. And for us, during the installation of the exhibition, because first we want to have, for example, Tarasov, because for the concert yesterday in the evening, because we saw the artist list and know a little bit more about the exhibition we were responsible for. And we think, oh, that is one person or one figure that could be a crossover in between the both scenes. And during the installation, especially in the discussion with Markus and Daniel, we discovering that a lot more relationships are going on from the material. And this is for us very interesting, but we hope, of course, also for the public it could be interesting to see such details or such things, and to remember also the kind of emotional energy could combined with the political side, could also combined in this special office here with the crossover from the different arts. And so it's not, sagt man Zufall, it's not a chance that you are both here because they say I'm a filmmaker and I'm a musician, but they are also from different parts here from the Academy. It is a project we made together from the Department of Visual Arts and from the Department of Music, and we discussed it also before. And we tried then to make also cross over the music program as a third part or second part of the whole project, together also with the so-called discursive part that we could see from one fit in the other and could look for the crossover points and so on. And that is for me personal a pleasure to discover this, and so I hope also for the public that we could discover more things that combine this discussion. And that is also very interesting in this manner. Some of the heroes also of the older periods which we invited, for example for the discursive program or from different kind of oppositional sides of argumentation, in which way they react also about the over conceptions or about the questionnaire we come to them. And that is the possibility to be a forum or a platform to discuss such things. It is for me the potential insight or impact.
Over the years when Daniel and I have worked together, we've often been struck that art historians seem a little bit deaf and that musicologists often seem a little bit blind. And what's so striking about these cultures is, in both rooms, is that it's really about this intermediate practice, right? It's the sort of heroes of these two rooms aren't interested in the distinctions. They're kind of often very much interested in how we might combine sound and image in some ways. So I think it's great to have these two exhibitions here, but maybe there's another thing we could think about, which is actually the challenge then, which is, you know, the exhibition is often, honestly, predominantly as a visual experience. And as curators, we have to then think quite hard about how to kind of capture something of the experience of being in that audience and without pastiche as well. Markus, do you have any thoughts about what it is to curate a show, which is, you know, starts from music but has to address the visual as well?
Yeah, that's. I think that's one of the fortunate challenges that we have to face, because we're dealing with something that's ephemeral, yeah, and we want to make it real in the now, and I think you're absolutely right in how you describe both those your interesting comment on the deafness of historians. I love that idea. Just another little anecdote. What I find super interesting, and Wolf Herzogenrath was very adamant to tell me the story in full detail. You know, there's only one person, who documented and photographed the Namjoon Pike television sets in his first exhibition. The dead, destroyed TV, and the ones that showed something. It's like everybody thought, yeah, okay, it's a broken TV. Yeah? But one person took photos of what it looked like when it works, when it doesn't work, and so on. And that's Peter Brötzmann. Yeah? He understood. You know, he was Pike's assistant, yeah? But he didn't have, his task was not to document this. But he understood that visual reality as something that has a rhythm and a musical quality. Yeah? Now, I think it is really worthwhile to realize, I don't want to come back to that opposition talk because I think we look fundamentally different at these things. Yeah? For me, this is not a homogeneous group at all. Not at all. It's not a homogeneous group. You know, it's like, and even FNP, you know, there were distinct political differences. And Brötzmann very nicely in an interview says that even though he strongly identifies with the political left here, and he strongly believes that only out of that position is possible to do what he did, he knew that the political actors of his time, yeah, they didn't understand what he was doing because they wanted to hear Joan Baez. Yeah? They were, I think it's important to understand that here, the driving forces, Jost Gebers, Brötzmann, they were both professionals in dealing with visual material. Yeah? They had studied what we call graphics today. Then, of course, Brötzmann still works artistically. Yeah? Mengelberg, Benny, and so on. They do this as a practice, and only nowadays these things are also realized and recognized. And on the other way around, I find it really fascinating that we are sitting here and what now suddenly there are exhibitions about music and also spaces, museum spaces that are opening up to represent these ephemeral projects. Cecil Taylor had a retrospective, not at BAM, Academy of Music, but at the Whitney Museum for American Art. Yeah? Or the Walker Center in Minneapolis. They just invited me to write an essay about the force of musician-driven initiatives, yeah, in art museum. They suddenly find this interesting, and yeah, there are these crossovers, and I think one of the imminent challenges is how to put that into an exhibition, yeah? Because music is not a sculpture, yeah. And you can see there are really different approaches here. And I said earlier, what I love about the Notes from the Underground, it's like an archipelago. Yeah? This is like a constellation of islands over there. Yeah? And each island is highly complex. Yeah? And you as a visitor, you can move along and pick your own. And it's also not, it's not a one-directional narrative, it's multi-directional, and it's also not really hierarchical in that sense.
But I think we have an advantage in a way, and I don't want to make it too big a claim, but this is relatively unknown material outside of its local context. Yeah. So it gives you a kind of freedom, because we don't have to deal with a kind of master narrative. There's no pre-existing history that we have to do duty to. There aren't a set of heroes here. But do you think with F&V there's a difference? Because there is a kind of set of myths in a way, and a set of central figures that you have to do duty to. Does that impact on the way that you think about this show?
Very good question. Yeah, I think that once you deal with a closed phenomenon, yeah, you always deal with the question: is this a hagiography? Yeah? And yes, the people who drove this, yeah, are Brötzmann, Gebers, Kowald, Schlittenbach, and so on. One of the challenges, and I hope we find entryways into that, is that FNP is a phenomenon that is usually reduced, yeah, to specific sets of fandom or prejudices. Yeah? FNP, oh my God, Brötzmann. First of all, he cannot play saxophone. Second, he plays the same all the time. Yeah? That's the classical prejudice, and he's been listening to that for 50 plus years. Yeah? Now, I would say FNP is not really homogeneous. It's homogeneous in the sense that they decided to pay every musician the same money. Yeah? That's political. That's what they did. Yeah? But how can you possibly discuss a Hans Reichel guitar solo with an Africa Jolie West African drumming, with the Yoshi Wada composition, with a Burkhard Gletzner piece, with Luis Morodo, Larry Stebbins. Yeah. They're worlds apart. Yeah. And I'm hoping that, that yes, there is the narrative of these shakers and makers, yeah, but there are also multiple layers behind that surface, and there is a multitude of smaller stories. And one of the things that I found, and that really surprised me, because it tells you a lot about the ways that we still live in this world, whether we like it or not. What do I mean by this? Now, I know all the programs, yeah? I read them all. I know the names. And when working in Jost's archive, and you look at the negatives, what suddenly occurred to me was, there are a lot of guitarists that are in these negatives, but there are also a hell of a lot of women. I read all the names, but only when seeing the images, I realized there were women like almost on every occasion. Now, there is a section in the exhibition that pays homage to that. It's not more than that, because I didn't really have the time to go in depth into that question. Yeah? But it is important to note that on the first Total Music meeting, you had Maggie Nichols, you had women there, you had, of course, vocalists. Yeah? But on the bill was Donata Höfer, leading the band, a woman pianist. I think that's very important, and these are also things that I try to bring into that equation. I also try to make it more complicated.
How about the music program that you showed? Could you just say something about the discursive, the music program, the exhibition? Obviously not interested.
No, I just, I think we have to clear it up. Yeah, Louis is not the co-curator of the music program. Louis is the curator of the music program, and I have little stints. Yeah, I have just tiny peaks. Yeah, but Louis is that curator, right? And I think he obviously has a very different approach.
Because it's in this book.
Yeah.
It says co-curator.
Yeah. No, I don't want to. I really think I'm very happy that I'm responsible for little peaks here.
Yeah.
But 90% of the work was done by Louis.
Okay. And does Louis want to say something about his choice?
I mean, yes, April weekend with Peter, which you coordinated together with him, pretty much connects on the old workshop Freie Musik festivals, which is beautiful, I think, because Peter and his folks plus Heather will spontaneously curate the evenings by themselves. And in addition to that, it was an adventurous task for me to design a program for 2.5 months that possibly shows the whole diversity of what is called or what you connect with improvisation as an attitude towards life, and also as an attitude towards business structures. Because this is what I find most interesting actually when I look, when I deal with the FMP history, as I said before, finding a group of people who, what you said with empowerment, who organize themselves. You can find similar, hard-working groups of people on whole planet nowadays too, but of course with completely different points of views and with different problems, because in the 21st century also the frictions and points of friction changed. Globalization and digitalism changed a whole infrastructure and also automatically the music. And not a negative way, but in a very vibrant and diverse way, which is why I consciously choose to work in an eclectic way, presenting both completely free improvised music and premieres, like now on Saturday, with the Berlin-based dancer Marcella Kiesche and with her two Scandinavian comrades. They have never been working before together and will meet for the first time on stage this upcoming Saturday in the studio for an interdisciplinary premiere, because improvised music is a wide range, and so both the musicians themselves are very different and has their individual motivations, both psychologically and musically different, and that's why from the Trondheim Jazz Orchestra in April up to Stephen O'Malley on the 1st of May, we will have plenty of diverse guests who also has nothing specifically to do with the FMP history themselves, but I guess there are plenty of musicians and artists whose reputation and musical speech and their quality consciousness is not imaginable without the legacy, for example, of such a revolutionary organization like free music production. But all artists, and this is also what both exhibitions connect, is of course the matter of improvisation as an attitude towards life, and that's why also the generations and geographical backgrounds of all artists will that diverse.
Maybe it's the moment just briefly to just at least to remark that there's another curator, Sergei Nevsky. This is why it's co-curators. It's Sergei and Louis, and Sergei can't be here today. He has other Verpflichtungen, and so you did not really work together. It was really like you were more on the FMP side, and Sergei was more kind of responsible for the Eastern Europe part.
He was very independent. Yeah.
He was very independent. Well, that seems to be another story. Probably.
Yeah, very.
But I just want to say it because also what I started with was a bit related to his thoughts, which I read in his essay in the catalogue. Just to clarify, I didn't say this is a political homogeneous group, but only what I meant was the atmosphere at the time, in general. So the kind of pathos which was evident everywhere. But just to clarify, the other thing is that those two exhibitions you made, I mean, to be honest, I didn't have the time to see everything now very, thoroughly, carefully. But the Anmutung, the way, the impression you get there is so different. I like that, but it's so different. When I go there, there's still a kind of anarchic, or there's a kind of anarchic feeling I get immediately. So many individual positions on the sculptural side, and here we come in here, it's very cool.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. It's very cool.
It's very perfect.
It's cool. It's photography, at least in this direction. It's mainly photography, and it's very cool. It's kind of Wertung. So it's just I like that it's like yin and yang somehow.
That is also our dramaturgy for the exhibition in Hull, and I like it. And maybe I want to come back to two questions. One is to make music exhibition. I think it has also to do with the time today at the moment, because you have a lot of other expositions thinking about in which way we could present or exhibit performance art. And that has to do also with the 70s and with a kind of reenactment in a way and all these questions. And of course we made also other experiments with other kind of art what focused or what deal with this question. And so it's a special thing here to make this music and visual art combination or crossover. We make, you know, the Cage project also and the Tsangaris exhibition and other projects in this way. And here we tried more than maybe in the other, and that is, I think, a quality of this. Also when it is sometimes independent or difficult, that we tried from the beginning to think that also a music program should be an equal part from the whole project. We want not only to think about exhibited, also temporary art expressions, we want also to hear something. And this we tried also in another way to combine with the discursive program. For example, with Rastig, that you not also think about reenactments, that you also think about recomposed visual scores anyway. And you have it not only in the program, you could also join in the exhibition and put here to the very nice visual scores which come from Butch, from the museum, in which way she now deals with her older visual scores. And so this and then they make also another performance in the discursive program, which is combined with the music program. That was the idea. Something, of course, it's difficult because all the people are sitting here or involved in the project. We're not in the same city and have different kinds of input in it. But that was our task, and also maybe an adventure to come together. And that is for me one quality of this. And because in the Notes from the Underground, it is maybe more better when you explain it, but the special situation is with Super 8 film, for example, that a lot of live music is necessary to perform it. In some views you could see it in the exhibition, and other you couldn't hear it in the exhibition in a way, but that is a special point for East European thing and the crossover also with the subject.
Yeah, Angela, somehow you opened up with your discursive program, you opened up the Notes from the Underground exhibition somehow, including the film programs, for example, which will be presented. So, and also some pieces of, especially of German democratic artists. And for me that was very exciting, because I belonged to the blind West, you know, in that time. We had no idea what was going on. We came to Poland, to Yugoslavia, but we had no idea what happened in the German Democratic Republic. And now this opens up, and it opens up in another way. What I really must say, when I started as a young artist, Russian avant-garde art was the most important art art influence for me. The avant-garde. This was avant-garde, and this is still today. But we had no idea what was going on later in the art of the Eastern countries. And I think this is so important that you open this up and give a new, also a new emotion, a new look on what happens in the Eastern countries. Yeah, just thank you.
Thank you, that's very kind.
One question before, maybe then we open once again, try. But one question, because Markus, in music, the relationships between, for example, West and East Berlin were more alive than as what Birgit said. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, FMP was the first Western platform to record East German artists in the GDR, in the Leperstraße, for example, and also bring GDR musicians to West Berlin and record them in West Berlin, also organizing tours, yeah, both in the GDR and in West Germany. And that started in 1973 and let's say culminated in the production of the so-called special edition Jazz Now, Jazz in the GDR in 1980, a double LP with a documentation that presented a pretty wide array of musics from the GDR.
Isn't that strange that music didn't seem to be so as dangerous?
Yeah.
Or why? What do you think? Which were the reasons that there could be an exchange? Also in the academic music, there was quite an exchange. I mean, there was.
I think that's also something that has to be looked at in terms of broader historical strokes. First of all, there was a time when Stalin was still alive. Yeah, there was no easiness about anything there, and up until then, jazz was considered to be degenerate, yeah, in the Eastern Bloc.
There's a famous quotation from Stalin saying, "First you start to play saxophone, and then you betray your country."
Okay.
That's
Sure.
yeah. And so you can really. There's a wonderful dissertation by Harald Kisiedo, and I'm unfortunately unable to give you all the names and all the dates. But in the example of the GDR, you can very much describe when the post-Stalinist times began, yeah, and when. And I think we all have to be very aware of that fact. When the power of jazz or improvisation was understood to be an internal force and point of identification for both systems. Yeah? Because mind you, just like Serge Guilbault taught us about abstract expressionism, yeah? The rise and the triumph of post-war American painting was financed by the CIA. Yeah? And the CIA paid for Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington in Moscow as well. So as of the 60s, yeah, West Berlin was able to finance FMP because improvisation was the beacon of individual expression, and in parts of the East, jazz, of course, was the music of the enslaved, yeah? Opposing the oppressor, opposing US empire.
If I may add something, maybe the notion of abstraction is important here.
Absolutely.
After the death of Stalin, some of the states are starting to consider abstract art as art that doesn't necessarily express anything political. So it's allowed. In Poland, that's electroacoustic music, something that we share interest in David. Experimental Studio of Polish Radio is founded in 1957 because the state is regarding it as a high technical facility to produce meaningless programs that can be then distributed to show how People's Republic of Poland is liberal when it comes to art. The same goes with for abstract paintings that are suddenly again allowed, and the same goes for free jazz in the 70s in Soviet Union that starts to be released by Melodia Records. The same goes for free jazz in East Germany. The Amiga starts to put out and invest also in touring for at least some of the artists. So you know, it's a story probably of reception of how these different waves are being regarded, and of the fact how some of the nets of of distribution become official and semi-official just because they're regarded as harmless or not harmful. Whereas, I mean, free jazz is being embraced in the GDR, whereas the punk rock, I mean, until something like 85, is still being viciously fought against.
Yeah. So music is dangerous.
I mean, if you see it as dangerous, it probably is.
But I think it's also kind of Esperanto, another kind of language, what is maybe more easier to make this exchange possible, because they could hear the international radio missions for such things and not so often see in original the paintings from the other countries.
Correct me, but this was also a problem because in the GDR people could see German, I mean the Western German television also. So this was dangerous for the system. So.
Not in Dresden.
So that So, but maybe we open it up for a moment.
Ja, because we have to.
Critic.
Angela, du hast das gesagt, wir müssen pünktlich hier schließen, ne?
Ja, wir haben noch einen Moment.
We have another 2 minutes for the rest of the festival. Are there any questions?
Ach, darf ich noch eine Sache sagen? May I add just one thing about dangerous, not dangerous free jazz? Yeah. I grew up in completely classic, loving family and in this bourgeois surrounding, and all the free jazz was aggressively fought. You know, that for them that was real dangerous music. You know, so this is how I learned it when I was in the 50s, when I lived in the 50s. Okay.
Glory times.
Yeah, so we're talking about two completely different exhibitions, and we're trying to find out what are the common points and where do they differ. My idea is, was there any cooperation beforehand? Because as I understand it, both exhibitions are a lot smaller than they were originally. And like in deciding which parts of the original exhibitions would go here, was there a discussion between the different parts?
No.
Oh, okay.
Short answer.
The Notes from the Underground is not particularly smaller, but it has different objects. And I think that we worked with Angela to introduce more East German material, for which we're very grateful, because it helps us perhaps speak to a local audience here in a particular way. So it's a change of emphasis, but it's not particularly a smaller show as a consequence.
It still takes you 3 days to watch the entire
Yeah, also, no, there have been no direct exchanges, but again, I would say that the exhibition is different, is smaller, but I kind of like it better here than in Munich, which is very hard for me to say, because I love Munich, and I also, sounds a little bit stupid, I also got a lot of very positive responses for the Munich presentation. Yeah. Here, of course, you have an extra value that is very interesting. We are in a space of aura. Yeah. FMP happened here. It sounded here, and you can hear it in the recordings. I highly recommend to listen to Bone by Steve Lacy in the, for example, between. It gives me shivers. I actually also like, and I think you are completely right with labeling this presentation cool. Yeah. In Munich, for a lot of reasons, it was cool and elegant. Yeah. Elegant. Yeah. Here, it's cooler. But now, my understanding of FMP, the more I work with the material is, just think of FMP as a conceptual artwork, a conceptual piece of art by a collective. If you look at the way that FMP documented what they did, meaning taking photos, producing flyers, and so on. The texts that they wrote. And from the very beginning, you have bilingual snippets that tell you what they are, who they are, what they want to do, and what their aim is. And it's crystal clear language. This is like a solid text. It's crystal clear. So it's cool. It's a cool intellectual process. And I think also the room is so cool that Jos gave us left. But I think one also has to understand that only somebody like Jos Gevers, who, when you go into his archive, you understand the guy is Prussian to the max. The order in that archive, the precision with everything is in its place, is fantastic. So I believe that you need these rigid conceptual rules and regulations to have a platform that invites people as distinctly different as Peter Brötzmann and yeah, you name it, yeah, into one space. Yeah. And these rules and regulations also enable FMP to overcome maximum, yeah, of let's say disagreement. Yeah. And I hope I'm not boring anybody, but one more example. Yeah, we have the feminist improvising group in the vitrine, and we found their recordings. That was an English group titled Feminist Improvising Group, FIG, and they played Total Music Meeting in 1979. Yeah. Now, in the memory of all members, the male FMP protagonists and the women who were in the band, they have a memory of a distinct trauma. Yeah. The male peers hated feminist improvising. They thought they can't play, yeah, there's too much fun. You know, look at Maggie Nichols, she was so seditious while singing, the trumpet player can't really play trumpet. Horrible, horrible. Yeah. Of course, all of that was part of a, I would say, a stage set. Yeah. They wanted, yeah, it was a display of playing trumpet when you don't, when you're not able to play trumpet. Interestingly enough, that's of course an old trope. You know, Ornette Coleman did that years before, but it created a discord through this sense. The women remember that the peers hated it, were so aggressive against it. Now, first of all, that being the case, what did it mean to play Total Music Meeting? For everybody, it meant you played 3 nights. 3 nights, everybody. So, Feminist Improvising Group played the first night. Everybody hated it. What would be, you know, what would be a possible solution? The possible solution is FMP says, thank you very much, Fig. Yeah, that was awful, and off you go, you know. One time is one time too many. But no, they played their 3 gigs. Yeah. And we now, the other thing, we found the recordings, and I listened to them. I'm totally perplexed, because what happened after each piece? Enthusiastic audience. Total freak out. People were stomping, encore, encore. I mean, it was 110% positive energy from the audience. None of the actors remembered that. None of the actors remembered that. Yeah? And so I asked Jos, so how does that come about? And he says, yeah, very simple. Yeah. Feminist Improvising Group was such a strong message into the community that every feminist in Western Europe came to that concert and showed solidarity. There were like 75% women in the crowd. And I think, I really believe you have to be pretty cool to organize that. Especially in a time when, you know, these people needed FMP also for bread and butter. You know, they needed those gigs. But they opened it up into those kinds of moments. And yeah, that's why I think a little bit of coolness is good.
Yes. So, last call. Any questions, remarks, Kritik, Verbesserungsvorschläge? No, then thank you very much, everyone. I found it very interesting. I mean, besides what I said, of course, but I learned something. And so we are looking forward to the concert tonight also. And there are also other things happening.
Yes.
I'm
The reason
interested.
that we must go out, sorry. Because the next one is beginning in a half hour.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Ah, yeah, there's a nice book. You see that?
That's a fantastic book.
And heavy book.
Thank you.